Hello and welcome to part 25 of my Japanese for Beginners series. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use the Te-iru form of verbs and all of the conjugations that go with it to be able to say that you are doing a verb, or you were doing a verb, or you are not doing a verb, or you were not doing a verb, or you used to not do the verb, or you used to do the verb. This lesson corresponds with pages 170 to 172 of the Genki Volume 1 textbook, but don't worry, even if you don't have that textbook, you can still follow along. では始めましょう。Do you remember the te forms of verbs? If not, check out that lesson that I did a little while ago. It's going to be very helpful. So far we have learned basically the present and future tense of verbs and the past tense of verbs. So you know how to say that you're going to do something or that you do something in a general sense, and you know how to say that you did something. So we call this the dictionary form of a verb if it is the I do something in a general sense, or I am going to do something. And that's your verbs like taberu, kau, benkyou suru. Those are all in their dictionary form. Or in their masu forms, it would be tabemasu, kaimasu, and benkyou shimasu. And we also learned how to say that you did a verb in a past tense. That's going to be their ta forms or their mashita forms. So it would be tabeta, katta, benkyou shita, or tabemashita, kaimashita, or benkyou shimashita. So we know all of those conjugations already. But now we're going to learn how to say that you are doing, were doing, are not doing, were not doing, things like that. And it's actually quite simple if you know how to convert verbs from their dictionary form to their te form. Once you have the te form of the verb, it's very easy to do this grammar rule. So first we're going to learn how to say that you are doing a verb, present participle tense. Not that you will do or that you do a verb, but that you are currently doing a verb. So it's a pretty simple formula. If you know the te form of the verb, all you have to do is add iru or imasu to the end of the te form of a verb. So I'm going to give you a few examples to demonstrate. Boku wa sushi o taberu. That means in a general sense, I eat sushi. But if I say boku wa sushi o tabete-iru, that means I am eating sushi. As in, like right now, I am eating sushi. Watashi wa akai doresu o kimasu. That means, like in a general sense, as for me, I wear a red dress. I wear red dresses. I don't, I am wearing a blue dress. Actually, I was gonna wear a red dress, but it was turtleneck and I didn't want to mess up my makeup, so blue dress. Anyway, if I want to say that I am wearing a red dress, which is false, but let's lie. Watashi wa akai doresu o kite imasu. So I am wearing a red dress. Here's another one. This is a question. So, nani wo shimasu ka? That means just in a general vague sense, what do you do? Or what will you do? What will you do is actually a better translation of this. And side note, anyone else who's old, remember the Goonies game for the original NES? The original Nintendo Entertainment System? There was this old lady and it was like, you'd go to her in her house and she'd like say some nonsense and you're supposed to slap her a bunch of times and then like some like, you know, secret happens. But when you slap her, she says, ouch! And then, what do you do? And as a kid, my brother and I were so confused. We thought it was just a bad translation for what are you doing? But actually, it was, what are you going to do? What will you do? And it wasn't the old lady saying it, it was the game saying that, like, what's your next move, basically. So, nani wo shimasu ka? Like, what will you do? But if you want to say, what are you doing? That would be nani wo shite imasu ka? So what are you doing? What are you in the state of doing? What is it that you are doing? So now if you want to say that you were doing something, not that you are doing, but you were doing, you take the te form of the verb and you add ita or imashita, depending on what level of politeness you want. So this can also have an I used to do this verb nuance to it. It's not just I was doing this verb. Sometimes it is I used to do this verb, or I used to be in the state of this verb, but now I am not. So here are some examples. Kare ga waratta. So that just means he laughed. Pretty straightforward. But kare ga waratte ita means he was laughing. Kimi o itsumo mimashita. That means I always watched you. But 君をいつも見ていました means I was always watching you, and that's going to be a very, very common, some iteration of those words. Sometimes it would be like いつも君を見ていました. That's probably like usually the word order that you'd see it. You'd have the いつも first. But anyway, yeah, that's something that guys will always say about girls or to girls in shoujo manga. I was always watching you. That's not at all creepy. Anyway, that's the difference between I always watched you versus I was always watching you. Here's another one, a longer sentence. お父さんはテレビの前でタバコを吸いました. So that's just, my dad smoked in front of the TV. Versus, お父さんはテレビの前でタバコを吸っていました. Dad was smoking in front of the TV. 昔はいつも逃げた. In the past, I always ran. It's a little bit poetic there. Versus, 昔はいつも逃げていた. So in the past, I used to always run. So there's this used to feel. It wasn't I was always running. That's kind of not the best translation, but it's like I used to always run. I used to always be on the run. I used to always run away. It has this more used to feel. Especially since we're using particle wa. And we're going to get into, in a pretty soon future video, the difference between wa and ga, and why the wa makes it sort of like I used to do this, but now, blah, blah. But that's a later lesson. So anyway, to say that you are not doing something, all you have to do is change the ru to nai, or the masu to masen. So it's either inai or imasen. So here are pretty much those same verbs again. It means waratte-iru. That means is laughing, or laughing changes to waratte-inai, which means is not laughing. Hashitte imasu is running, changes to hashitte imasen, is not running. Non de imas is drinking, changes to non de imasen, is not drinking. So as you can see, you can conjugate those verbs into some of the model sentences I just gave you guys earlier to just say the negative versions of those sentences. It's that easy, you just plug them in. So now how to say someone was not doing something. So not is not, but was not. So past tense and negative, doing something. You just change the nai to nakatta, or the masen to masen deshita. So those same examples now, we're going to morph them a stage further. Waratte-inai is laughing becomes waratte-inakatta, was not laughing. Hashitte imasen is not running becomes hashitte imasen deshita, was not running. Nonde imasen is not drinking becomes nonde imasen deshita, was not drinking. Now here's a catch. There's always a catch. The te-iru or te-imasu forms of these verbs are not always best expressed as like is doing or am doing. Sometimes it really is just to describe a state of being. And to demonstrate this concept, I'm gonna give you guys the same sentence pretty much 5 different times just to illustrate how it can change depending on these endings. So, spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't seen Sailor Moon Classic, this is spoilers for like episode 20 or something. Anyway, Nephrite. It's pretty much common knowledge. You probably know this. But anyway, Nephrite ga shinimasu. That means Nephrite will die. Here's another one. Nephrite ga shindeimasu. So this, you might think it means Nephrite is dying, like he is in the process of dying. But what it actually means is Nephrite is dead. So think Nephrite is in the state of being dead. Nephrite is being dead. Nephrite's dead in good English. So shinderu, shindemasu, shindeimasu, shindeiru, that's a very like common example of how the te-iru form of a verb is used to describe just a state that a person is in versus like they are currently doing this verb. It's like he's doing the verb of being dead. So here's another example. Oh yeah. So just a side note, if you wanted to say that Nephrite is dying, like he is in the process of dying, that would actually be Nephrite ga shindeikimasu. And I don't think that grammar rule is covered in Genki Volume 1, but just to let you guys know that it exists, you can say Nephrite is like in the process, currently dying, but you don't say it with shindeimasu or shindeiru. That means he is dead. Here's another one. Nephrite ga shindeimasen. So basically that's the negative version of shindeimasu, which means he is dead, he is being dead. So that means Nephrite isn't dead. ネフライトが死んでいました。That means Nephrite was dead. So maybe he was dead and now he's not. ネフライトが死んでいませんでした。That means Nephrite wasn't dead. So it doesn't mean Nephrite wasn't dying, it means Nephrite wasn't dead. And just to use some verbs that are less depressing than dead, to hammer home the concept that te-iru and te-imas can illustrate a person's current state of being versus what actions they are currently doing, here are some more sentences that are very typical. So, 私は結婚しています. That means I am married. It doesn't mean I am marrying or I am currently in the process of getting married. It means I am in the state of being married, which is true. I'm married. Here's another one. 去年は太っていたけど、今は痩せています. Here's another true statement about me. So it means last year I was fat, but now I am thin. So 太っている or 痩せている. 太っている means is being fat, and then 痩せている means is being thin. Those are verbs. 太る means it's a verb, it means to get fat, and then 痩せる is a verb which means to get thin. So you would use the te-iru form of those verbs, or te-ita in the first case. I used to be fat, and now, but now I am thin. And finally, a quick note, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that in colloquial speech and everyday speech, and I slipped up a couple times while I was saying things in this video because it's hard for me to say te-iru and te-inai because, spoiler alert, in everyday casual conversational Japanese, they usually drop the e. So it's teru and tenai. It's not te-iru and te-inai, it's just teru and tenai. So I'm going to give you guys some examples of how these verbs convert. Just drop the e, just forget about the e, and it's the same. So mite-iru becomes just miteru. Mite-imas, the polite version, becomes mite-mas. Mite-ita, was seeing, becomes miteta. And then was seeing polite, mite-imashita, becomes mite-mashita. And like, what exactly is the difference between leaving the e in and taking it out? It's pretty much just like contractions in English. It's like saying can't instead of cannot. So, you can say cannot, and you do say cannot if you want to like emphasize something, and that's kind of how the iru part works. It's like te-iru. It's like then you're really emphasizing, I'm doing. But if you're in just casual speech, or not even casual, like formal speech, they do this too. It's just more natural to drop the e. You don't really need it. So here are a couple like very colloquial, very common phrases. Well, the phrases themselves aren't literally like what people would say, but like these verbs are very common. So, ねえ、お金持ってる? That means, hey, do you have any cash on you? So, 持ってる would come from 持っている, which means is having. Are you having money? But it's one of those things. Are you in the state? Do you have money? ラルクのハイドって知ってる? So the small tsu with a te basically is putting everything that comes before it in quotes. So ラルクのハイド, so hide from lark and shell, however you pronounce that. ラルクアンシェル, French for rainbow, but it's a visual kei band from the 90s and early aughts. Anyway, te, like lark and shells hide. 知ってる? So 知ってる, very common. You can just ask 知ってる? For anything. And it's basically, have you heard of this thing? Or do you know about this thing? Are you in the state of knowing about this thing? Shiru is the verb that means to know. So that's how you get shitteru. Shiru is a u verb, not a ru verb, even though it seems like it should be a ru verb. It's an u verb. So it conjugates to shitte-iru or shitteru in this case. Here's another one. まだ着替えてない. So mada means still, and then kigaeru is the verb that means to change clothes. So kigaete nai, I haven't changed clothes yet. It means I'm still not dressed yet, basically. I'm still not in the state of like having changed my clothes. And now we're on to the review. I have timestamps in a pinned comment at the top of the comments section and in the video description below. Click to whichever sentence you want to practice and press pause after I say the sentence so that you can practice repeating the sentence back to me, and then just click on those timestamps over and over again for whichever sentences you want to keep listening to and practicing, and choose your own adventure. 僕は寿司を食べている。私は赤いドレスを着ています。何をしていますか？彼が笑っていた。君をいつも見ていました。お父さんはテレビの前でタバコを吸っていました。昔はいつも逃げていた。ネフライトが死んでいます。私は結婚しています。去年は太っていたけど、今は痩せています。ねえ、お金持ってる？ラルクのハイドって知ってる？まだ着替えてない。Thanks for watching. In the next lesson, we're going to learn another use for particle de. It doesn't always mean that you're performing a verb at a location. It can sometimes mean you're using a noun to perform a verb, an activity. So we're going to learn another use for particle de. And thank you to all of the patrons who support this series and other series on this channel. If you felt that this lesson was a little easy for you, I have playlists for Japanese learners at the intermediate to advanced level, and they're floating above my face somewhere. And otherwise, I hope to see you in the next lesson of Japanese for beginners. またね!